Hello, this is the Harbor and Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. All right, so feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out. And also, incentive to, share your thoughts here with the holiday season coming up. Feel free to, give holiday stories, advice, and so forth. And I will read those comments on this episode. And also, those in the YouTube community, feel free to continue to reach out. And I do greatly appreciate those who have done that. So on YouTube, and those who have done outside of YouTube, who have sent me thoughts and everything. I greatly appreciate it. All right, so some of the audio platforms that I'm on Speaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Deezer, just to name a few. Okay, so this episode is focusing in on the movie Gold Rush. Here we go. Okay, so my thoughts before I get into the facts about this movie. Silent films here. It's quite interesting, even in the era of silent films. Most of the times, if when people would go to the Nickelodeons and so forth to watch them, they would still have the ante of having a showman on the stage, playing the piano to accompany the aspects of sitting down and watching a fully film for so long. Because, typically, even then, that's going to take a lot for somebody to, actively sit down and watch something for so long, without any sound. It's just, you just read everything and that's it. But I think with a movie like Gold Rush, and particularly with the actor of Charlie Chaplin and his unique take and his what he brought to the table in the aspects of acting, it really brought the aspects of what you can do with silent film to another level. And so when I saw this movie, Gold Rush, now I must say, I never sit down and actually, watch a silent film. I just typically see like, shorts or, read about it or, heard commentary about silent films. But I never actually sat down and watched one. And I tell you, this movie is such a treat. And the reason why I say these things is this. For one, to start out with, they don't dilute or try to, talk down to the audience. They just tell the story and then expect the audience to be, clever enough to put both the pieces together. Hold on just a minute. So what do I mean by this here? There is a scene in this movie where, it's a rags to riches story. And then even though that this movie is depicted as a Thanksgiving movie, I think it's just the backdrop is holiday in itself. And I'll get back to that. So, towards the end of the movie here, Charlie Chaplin really hits gold. He gets his luck comes in. And the love interest, it is very heartwarming because it depicts the aspects of this the the morality question of, what's really important to somebody that actually cares for you before they knew that you struck gold, in this sense, or just somebody that knows of your wealth and they're with you. Like, you make that determination, and then it turns out that she, even though the circumstances were different, where and I'll suggest y'all to watch this movie. It's on HBO. It's on HBO. It's called Max now, but it's on that platform. And what I mean by the circumstances were different, it was one of those upheaval things where, a lot of obstacles were in their way, and for them to, connect and be together. That's what I mean by that. But she always had put her best foot forward. She always had, good intentions about everything. And so, hold on, I'm sorry, y'all. And so, it comes to terms about, it draws a conclusion when, when you see this film and when somebody's asking a question about, who is this person? Because, he was on he's being interviewed by the press. In this particular case, the press, the most popular press, the press at the time really was the newspaper. And so, he whispered in the guy's ear. So you draw the conclusion that he must mean that he is alluding that, they are to be engaged, or that she is to be his wife. Is those it's up in the air. But again, that's nice to have that sense of understanding that me as the viewer, the director and the artistry behind it, they expect for you to draw your own conclusions, to be, smart enough to do that, to take it as you will with the story. Now, the aspects of Thanksgiving and the holiday season in this movie is really reminiscent in the aspects of the times in which this film was made. So this film was made in 1925, I think. And that was around the time where, we're beginning with the aspects of the roaring 20s not being so roaring. When we get into the aspects of the end of the 20s, when you get the stock market crashing, and then, that is the brink to the link of the chain that goes on to the 30s here with the Depression. But still, there was very reminiscent in the aspects of poverty, in the aspects of survival, in the aspects of having the good fortune to be wealthy. And all of these elements are really well developed in this story. And I think that's, in a sense, in the aspects of how Charlie Chaplin, he's supposed to be, again, the aspects of the lovable tramp. And, what that really means is, a tramp for the most part. They're people that they're down on their luck, and it goes with the story plot here. They're down on their luck, but they have the ability to get out of their circumstances here. And it really shows that element and how that develops throughout the movie and how that progressed throughout the movie. And I think that the Thanksgiving scene here that's in this movie is the precursor to, develop the aspects of what goes on and how him and his buddy ultimately become successful. So in the Thanksgiving scene, they really don't have any food, and so they just are resourceful, so to speak, and they take what they can. So he uses his boot as an aspect of food, and they come to the circumstances of adapting to the elements in order to survive. And now, there's a scene where it goes to New Year's and New Year's Eve and all these kind of things. And the aspects of that is, I think, is very symbolic, and there's a new beginning on the horizon. And this is when it's very element into the character development of the love interest, which is Georgia, and her disposition and her worldview about everything too, and how that connects or correlates with Charlie Chaplin and his character, because I think it's a means to an end for him to realize and develop and to come out of his means of more meaning, more developing in meaning in everything. And then his friend too, in the course of the matter, is both really well developed of how his character traits, of how that is really important to the end of the story of how they both become successful, because it is very, very prevalent to how they depict the image of. It's really important to know who you are successful with, because in the end, if you get into this mentality of greed or backstabbing, that for the most part, as far as being emotionally wealthy or and so forth, and then versus being physically or concrete, have that wealth. It's a difference between the two, because it shows the moral compass here, and that is really well developed in the story plot. Particularly within how his friend, he still, even though he has his flaws, Charlie Chaplin, him and his friend, even though they both have the flaws, but his friend more so with his issues here, he still has the good faith mentality, and he still does what he can to be there for his friend. They both do what they can to be there for each other, and that's really prevalent in the aspects of Georgia and her development too, because initially, before she realized that Charlie Chaplin was the one that she is really the best for her, she was in the high life, living in the higher class tier of what you expect to think about people, young people, particularly in the 20s, when the images of the roaring 20s, these young, sophisticated, good-looking people just living it up. And her, I guess, Bo was, very, he was the personification of that. And she come to terms and realized when the way that he actually is not in her best interest. And all of these things, arc each other into the end point of what the morality of the story really is in this movie, Gold Rush. All right, so with all of this said, I am going to get into the facts of this movie. Here we go. All right, so of course sources will be provided for you in this episode here. Okay. And I'm reading from the AI generated response, and then I will get into some facts about the movie, okay? All right, so The Gold Rush is a 1925 American silent comedy film written produced and directed by Charlie Chaplin, who also starred in the film as his iconic Little Tramp persona. So the movie is set during the Klondike Gold Rush in Alaska and follows the lone prospector as he faces hardship like hunger, cold, and loneliness while searching for gold. Chaplin drew inspiration from the story by the real life story here of the Donner Party, who resorted to cannibalism and eating leather from their shoes during a snowstorm, which influenced the film's famous shoe-eating scene. So the film features several iconic sequences, including the dance of the diner, rolls, the cabin, teetering on the edge of the cliff, and the scene where the starving prospector's friend imagines him as a chicken. So the film was a major commercial success, earning over $4.25 million at the box office in 1926, making it the fifth highest grossing silent film in history. It released on June 26 of 1925 and received a widespread critical acclaim, with Mordaunt Hall of the New York Times calling it the outstanding gem of all of Charlie Chaplin's pictures. In 1942, Charlie Chaplin re-released the film and added sound effects, music, and narration, which earned Academy Award nominations for Best Music Score and Best Sound Recording. So the 1925 version entered the public domain in the United States in 1953 due to the failure to renew its copyrights. So the Gold Rush was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress in 1992, recognized as being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. It was also voted number 2 on the prestigious Brussels 12 list at the 1958 World Expo. So filming took place in Turkey, California, and Mount Lincoln, Colorado, and elaborate scene construction on Chaplin's Hollywood studio back lot. The original leading lady, Lida Gray, was replaced by Georgia Hale after Chaplin married her during production due to her pregnancy. So the film's production was marked by challenging conditions, with Chaplin filming in the Sierra Nevada snow country. Okay, so let's add on to this here. Because, of course, this is an AI-generated response. So, you take what you hear as facts with a grain of salt. All right, so it says, and this is by Britannica, it says, the Gold Rush American silent film starred Charlie Chaplin and was aimed at the Alaskan Gold Rush, that is, in the 1990s. So the tale follows the adventure of Charlie Chaplin's legendary character as he prospects for gold, fighting off wild animals and greedy competitors. As always, he is the hero and pursues a lover, and initially mocked and rejected, but triumphs in the end. So, already a major star by 1925, Chaplin developed The Gold Rush as his first starring feature film for the United Artists and the new studio created by Charlie Chaplin, director D.W. Griffith, and a husband and wife superstars Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. Because they were, powerhouses. Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, they were powerhouses in the silent film. So they decided to create, from what I understand, the United Artists, the movie production line, in order to have the leverage and leeway for them to be able to produce films, direct films, write things in their own terms, instead of being bounded by, unscrupulous contracts. There's a whole thing with that. And it's a lot of legendary tales about that, goes on to stretches out and on and to, the era of Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, all the way on to, the 70s and so forth. And then by the time the 70s hit, actors started, saying, hey, this is a time for us to start being our own producers, directors, let's start doing other things. So we're not, bound down so much by, these Hollywood contracts and all sort of things. There's a whole lot of interesting history and stories behind it. So that's another podcast here. So the starving tramp preparing his boot as a hot meal for him, and is equally desperate for it. And the tramp performing a dance with 2 bread rolls. It was for the gold rush that Chaplin most wanted to be remembered. All right, so I am going to add on to this here. And this is by the CharlieChaplin.com. So, filming the gold rush. So, Charlie Chaplin made the gold rush out of a most unlikely source for comedy. The idea first came to him when he was viewing some stereoscope pictures of the 1896 Klondike Gold Rush, and was particularly struck by the image of the endless line of prospectors shaking up the Chilkoot Pass. This was the gateway to the gold fields. At the same time, he happened to read a book about the Donner Party disaster of 1846, when a party of immigrants snowbound in Sierra Nevada were reduced to eating their own moccasins and the corpse of their dead comrades. So Chaplin provided his belief that tragedy and resilience are never far apart. So set out to transform these tales of improvisation and horror into comedy. He decided that his familiar Trump figure should become a gold prospector. So joining the mass of brave optimists to face all the hazards of cold, starvation, solitude, and the occasional incursion of a grizzly bear. The idea took place much more quickly than was usual for Chaplin. This was the only one of his great silent comedies which he began to shoot with the story fully worked out. Only 2 months after the premiere of his previous film, A Woman of Paris, he had already sent a scenario which was titled The Lucky Strike for copyright, and set his studio to work on building sets. Perhaps his activity was simulated by the public's disappointment with A Woman in Paris, which was a dramatic film in which Chaplin himself appeared only fleeting as an extra. Chaplin generally strove to separate his work from his private life, but in this case, the two became painfully mixed, as it says. Searching for the new leading lady, he rediscovered Leda McMurray, who he had employed as a pretty 12-year-old in The Kid. Still not yet 16, Leda was put under contract and renamed as Leda Gray. Chaplin quickly embarked on a clandestine affair with her. Now, okay, so hold on just a minute. This is something to bring up too, because when I saw the film, I the one that Robert Downey Jr. had done back in 1992. It had made that prevalent about the aspects of Charlie Chaplin. Particularly, they focused in on him marrying someone of 19 years of age, which is, at the time, I think he would have been much older. But, so this case here. So it's like, what the heck? Of course you have what the heck feeling. Because this is odd, because we are in times which is really, the aspects of crossing putting your foot in the sand with knowing what is morally not just, not right. But at the time, these things were seen as normal, particularly in the aspects of young girls being married off and all of these things. And this is a slippery slope here, too, when you think about the aspects of true advancement and enlightenment and, society. So that's why I say, it's very important. It's good, and, I appreciate what Charlie Chaplin has given into the aspects of historically with being what he had, his impact that he has with, Hollywood and entertainment. But this also plugs into the aspects too of the morality of behind the scenes of what's going on with Hollywood and so forth, and Hollywood and so forth, of how this sordid thing is nothing new, but the fact of how at the time in which this was going on, this wasn't so frowned upon because of the circumstance in which people were still living, as far as that disposition. And so, that's why it's really important with the aspects of, moving on and being more enlightened to, draw that line in the sand here when you know better. And then, it was unbelievable shocking really to, now this is a different subject, but it goes with the point to amplify what I'm talking about here. Around pre and during COVID, there was this whole notion and everything about the aspects that, call it for what it is here. People, they're called minor attracted people, but they're just, flipping pedophiles here. And so when you get into the slippery slope of saying, hey, let's redefine the imagery, the aspects of what this actually is, that's a detriment into the flourishment of culture. And that's something to consider here too. All right, so with this said, let's go on here. Chaplin found himself forced into a marriage which brought misery to both partners, though it produced two sons, Charles Jr. and Sidney Chaplin. All right, so as a result of these events, the production was shut down for 3 months. Lita was replaced on the film by an enchanting new leading lady, Georgia Hale. Georgia, then 24, had arrived in Hollywood after winning a beauty contest in Chicago and worked as an extra until Josef von Sternberg cast her in his shoes during debut film The Salvation Hunters. Chaplin screened the film in his home and instantly decided on Georgia, with her distinctive, delicate beauty, as his new leading lady. With the unforeseen interpretations and the distractions of the Chaplin's domestic turbilations, the production dragged on for almost a year and a half. It was in every respect that the most elaborate undertaking of Charlie Chaplin's career, this was. So for 2 weeks, the unit shot on location in Turkey in the snow country of Sierra Nevada. Here, Chaplin faithfully recreated the historic imagery of the prospector struggling up the Chilcoot Pass. 600 extras, many drawn from the vagrants here and of Sacramento, were bought by train to clamber up the 2,300 feet pass dug through the mountain snow. So for the main shooting, the unit returned to the Hollywood studio, where a remarkably convincing miniature mountain range was created out of timber, 250,000 feet. It was reported, chicken wire, burlap, plaster, salt, and flour. So the spectacle of the Alaskan snowscape, improbably glistening under the baking California summer sun, drew crowds of sightseers, and I would imagine that. In addition to the studio technicians that would devise exquisite models to produce the special effects which Chaplin demanded, like the miner's hunt, which is blown by the tempest, to the teetering on the edge of the of rock here, for one of the cinematics most sustained sequence of comedic suspense. Often it is impossible to direct the shift from model to full-size set. So the Gold Rush abounds with now classic comedy scenes. The historic horrors of starving in the 19th century and the pioneers inspired the sequences in which Charlie and his partner Big Jim, which his name was Max Swine, are snowbound and ravenous. Charlie cooks and eats his boot. Y'all, sorry, y'all. I'm sorry about that. I'm a little tongue-tied there. With all of the airs of a gourmet meal. In the eyes of the delirious Big Jim, he transforms into a chicken, and a triumph both for the cameraman who had to effect the elaborate trick work entirely in the camera, and for Chaplin, who magically becomes a bird. For one shot, another actors took turns in the chicken costume, but it was unsuitable, so no one else had Chaplin's gift for metamorphosis. All right, so I'll go on here. All right, so today, The Gold Rush appears as one of Chaplin's most perfectly accomplished films, though he himself was inclined to be changeable in his affections for his own work. To the end of his life, he would frequently declare that this was one by which he most wished to be remembered. So, the premiere of The Gold Rush in 1925 on June 26 was held in Hollywood's newest Wonder Theater, which was the Graham's Egyptian built, which was 3 years earlier, and inspired the recent discovery of the tomb of the Tutankhamun, King Tut here, and it was decorated in extravagant ancient Egypt style. It's Sid Graham, who was a friend of Charlie Chaplin and even accompanying the Gold Rush unit on location in the High Sierras. Graham was famous for the stage show, and was mounted as supporting attractions in the film, and determined to create one of the most spectator for the Gold Rush. So, Chaplin premiere reported in the Los Angeles Evening Herald, it was an outstanding event. There was not a vacancy in the opening of this event. So the courtyard in front of the Graham's Egyptian Theater was, as he continued, a veritable fairyland of color and light. Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, Gloria Swanson, Marion Davis, Buster Keaton, Constance and Norma Tamlek, William Fox, Cecily B. DeMille had taken pages to congratulate their friend. And it says that the curtain rose on a paranormal of the frozen north. So, I'd like to know what you all think. Feel free to reach out. And if you want to read more into this, the sources will be provided for you to do so. So this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye for now.